everybody. Welcome to the LitRPG Audiobook Podcast. I'm Ray, your very, very humble host, and today I'll be reviewing some recent and classic LitRPG audiobooks for you. All right, so the first book of the day is Galactic Badlands, a LitRPG space western. I like that concept a lot, cowboys and aliens sort of stuff, by Zachariah Jokulis. Narrated by Christopher James Mayer, and this is a book length of 7 hours and 2 minutes.
It was like I'd blinked in one place and then was somewhere else. But the thing was, I didn't actually have any memory of that first place. I just knew I'd been there. I vaguely remembered a spaceman and a clown, followed by the color red, but other than that, I was clueless. My brain was pudding that just wanted to enjoy that dying cloud and the mariachi music. Turns out my throat had other plans. Well, more specifically, the lump that had gotten caught in there. Even more specifically, the lump which was moving. I tried coughing to clear it, but it turns out it's bloody difficult to cough while lying flat on your back.
So, I always try to come clean on this. I got this book a little while back, and I tried to get to it as soon as I possibly could, but other things happened, and it was one of those ones that I actually listened to right before I went to the hospital, and I had notes taken down and things like this, and I just had never gotten a chance to get back to it. In fact, it was in my I thought I had done it already pile for this sort of thing, and I'm not really great with that sort of memory stuff because I've actually reviewed the same book twice. Thankfully, I've given it the same score on each occasion, but my memory on what I've done or haven't done is a little flaky sometimes. I'm one of these guys that you could actually very subtly suggest that I did something, and I would probably believe you until I was proven otherwise. So anyway, this is one of those books it tries a little too hard to be a lot of things, or at least maybe even jam a lot of stuff into it. It is a lit RPG book that is sort of mashed up with, like I said, cowboys and aliens. And to me, some of the best and worst parts of the book comes down to the MC himself. He's kind of a jerk. Honestly, he's one of these people that he wants people to treat him a certain way, but then he doesn't reciprocate those actions that he desires. Chuck, the MC, is a Marine who suddenly finds himself in a new world, and he actually dies pretty quickly in the start of the story. So his second time around, he gets things right, sort of. He's kind of figuring his way out, and he starts doing a little bit better. And I like how Chuck readily acclimates to his new life. I mean, it's just kind of like, okay, I know what I'm doing. I can see what I need to do, and I'm cool with it now. So he almost never even considers looking back in many ways. I mean, like, you don't really get a lot of, I miss my old life, or, this sort of, that I wish I was back home with family or friends or whatever. He just kind of just zones in on where he needs to be at the moment. And that's a pretty good thing. He's a in the moment kind of guy, in my opinion. So the problem is Chuck is pretty plain as leads go. Honestly, he isn't great at making decisions. He's goes out of his way to be rude to people, or at least be standoffish from them. In fact, the biggest problem I had with Chuck is that most of the other characters around him tend to outshine him in like almost every scene. So, while Chuck has all this potential and he does a lot of cool stuff, he's almost like the second fiddle to whoever else is in the room at the time. And it's really weird because, he is kind of vanilla, but vanilla can have sprinkles and chocolate on top and dip it. Oh, dang, I want some ice cream so bad right now. Anyway, the book, I don't know. I didn't feel like it was a harem book when it started, but it kind of gradually grew into one the whole time. So I kept wondering how the MC, being so plain, he's like yogurt when you're in an ice cream store. He got all the babes being the way he was, because he's not exactly somebody I'd have been like, chicks will be drawn to this cat. Well, they are. And of course, that's the story, and so I accept it for what it is. But Chuck never opens up about anything, and he has no problem giving others some sort of false or weak hope in their relationships. And there's a lot of things that he never resolves from his actions between, interactions from other people. So he's not really this really nice guy, but he ends up gaining his harem. So it's a little bizarre. And like I said, it's a mashup because it's Space Cowboys, it's LitRPG, it's harem. It kind of has all things to all people almost in that mindset. Mayor's narration, or Mayor's narration, okay, I backed up a little bit. Mayor's narration was kind of middle of the road stuff. I mean, there were parts where he was really good and parts I just wanted him to talk a little bit faster and maybe even blow his nose or something. Because it just sounded to me like he had like some sort of nasal impact or something. He just needed to blow his nose and he'd be good. I absolutely hated the music that is added in. The MC himself even says that it distracted him. Now, I like mariachi, okay? I love the movie El Mariachi, but it just did not fly here. Mariachi music was kind of annoying. The only positive I'll say about it is it didn't drown out the narration itself. The narrator was able to speak completely over top of the mariachi music, and it didn't fluctuate or fluster his reading or distract your ear. So it's kind of weird. But I do think, in my opinion, it could have been a little less, because it was still a little loud for me. And it kind of came across as like the El Duego. I don't know if you know the El Duego. I'm probably not saying that right. The El Duego. As it should have been. And the El Duego is, if you don't know, it is the throat-cutting song that when it's played during war, which is what Santa Anna did to the Alamo. The people were trapped inside, and he came up and he played the Del Guayo to kind of let them know there was going to be no quarter given. Not that they couldn't ask, but it wouldn't be given. So it just meant, we're going to kill you, we're going to slit all your throats, and you're going to die. And that, being that it was played outside of the Alamo every night before they were wiped, that would have fit the tale here a little bit better, even if it didn't please my ears. I really think a manlier tone to the music would have helped the story just a little bit. Oh my God, I can't. Now, I talk about this all the time to family and friends, and I can't even say it on this show. Del Guayo. The Del Guayo, or the El Del Guayo, okay, there I got it, would have helped a little bit, and I'd have probably preferred that. Now, overall, bits of the book worked and bits didn't. And again, and this is probably going to sound like a negative review, and I'm not, but I'm just saying there were things that really shined and really didn't work for me. Truly, giving the MC a different personality would have shifted the gears quite a bit. It would have changed the whole dynamic of the story. But he is a sort of anchor to everybody around him in a scene. And there is a lot of good stuff to the book, but the combo of the MC and the narration, I think Mayor would be great in another book, but he's weak here. It just doesn't really do it justice. So final score is 7 stars. It's a decent tale. It has a ton of potential if the MC has a personality implant in the next book. It does well with world building, and the secondary characters are really fun. The action's excellent. If you like a harem, this is a good harem book. But again, it just kind of tripped over its own feet sometimes trying to be awesome. And it really is pretty cool. And I like the concept a lot of the aliens and the Western aspect of it, and all that. It all kind of worked for the most part. But to me, the biggest drawback was the MC. And like I say, the hardest thing for me, and the reason why I call him an MC is because I can't remember his name. And I just did not go back to look it up, because to me, if it's a really great character, it'll stand out. If not, it's just the MC. And I can tell you about him, but I can't tell you what his name is. For example, I'll remember the MC of Noobtown. His name is Jim, just because there's a really good long-running joke in the book about what Jim is, who he is, and so on and so forth. Here I didn't get something that just leaped out at me. And it doesn't have to be a strange name or a weird name. I'll remember names from wherever. I might not remember what I did or didn't do, but I can tell you I remember the names of the things. And so in this case, it just didn't jump out. So he really needs to become less vanilla to bump up the series to a better score. I mean, that's the only thing I can say is, I didn't hate the book. I actually enjoyed it, but it could have been a touch better, and it just needed a couple things. But really, for me, the narration didn't click with the story, and that might have been a big factor, a really big factor. So, 7 stars. Okay, so moving down the list, we come to Occultist, Saga Online #1, a LitRPG series by Oliver Mays, narrated by Adam Sims, with a book length of 15 hours and 28 minutes. What the heck, he couldn't have shortened it up by 13 and had 15, just like... never mind. Okay, anyway.
Sticking his sword through their windpipe. Perma silenced. No, the cultists had been easy. The problem was they'd summoned. Damien hoped never to see another imp again. In all his years of gaming, he'd never encountered such an absurdly unpredictable enemy. Knee-high, ferocious, and single-minded, imps were the personification of anger following an extensive lobotomy. When under cultist control, they behaved more or less the way you'd expect, clawing and biting, leaping and snarling. Unfortunately, when Damien killed their masters, it was as if a cruel, mentally disturbed god had rolled a million-sided die to decide what they'd do next. One of them had swiped Damien's torch, set itself on fire, and clung onto his leg like a limpet, digging its claws in and screaming unintelligibly till it expired. That had caused significant damage, both to him and his equipped gear, as well as forcing him back to the dungeon entrance to find a new torch.
So as the old saying goes, move it along, nothing to see here, nothing new, move along. And that was how the book felt to me. It has several tropes that I have grown tired of, such as the sick mother, the other gamer being a total dick, the real world stuff intruding on the gaming, etc. But the book is done fairly well. It works really nicely. So even though this is one of those novels I'm going to say I completely do without, the real life drama, for instance. I completely could do without the one gamer being a total jerk. I could completely do without a number of things. All those things do come together and they work together nicely. Even the bad guy. As much as I say I hate those kind of characters, it reminds me of... There's a couple places it comes up, but for example, the World Tree bad guy, he's a lot like that. He's just this snivelly little dirtbag that, everybody thinks is cool, and then when the chance comes up, boom. But you'll see. Anyway, the story is fun, and it's about a guy who gets duped by another gamer because he kind of steals the other gamer's thunder after the gamer himself, the top dog in the game, wimps out of a battle that he's supposed to do for a podcast or a show or something along those lines. And the other guy kind of steps in, and even though he gets squishified pretty easily, in the battle, he handles himself enough to acquit any concerns that he's not a decent player, and he's actually kind of becomes a quick minor celebrity in the game. People take up his name and they start emulating him and looking like him and dressing like him and acting like him. So it's funny how that works to the point where he actually goes to get into the game. He can't even use his own name that he had in the trial demo. Because, what? Because there's like 8,000 people who have, emulated his character. So it was kind of funny in that aspect of things, and that was new. I like that a lot. But anyway, the jealousy that he has thrown upon him leads to him being all but destroyed. He's embarrassed. He's stripped down to his underpants, thrown into a pit, and left to die. And this is before he has a class choice or anything. He just kind of logs in and goes. And he ends up, rather than being killed, finding an opportunity for a rare class or an unused class in the game. And this kind of lets him summon various creatures, as part of his powers, so he can summon imps and succubi and incubi and you name it. There's all kinds of, and some of the summoning things are pretty cool. And he can, summon more as he levels up. So like maybe one imp to start off with, and then next thing you have 3, and the next thing you have 10, and then you can go to the incubus or the succubus. So it's pretty neat how his one power is. It almost comes across like a one-trick pony kind of thing, but he has other abilities that he uses in conjunction with the summoning, so it really works. It works really well. The action scenes work really well, too. I enjoyed the progression of Damien, the MC, and that's easy to remember because he works with demons, and Damien is from, the movie, The Omen, and his class throughout the book. So he actually proves to be quite adept at constructing battles, battle plans, and so on and so forth, so that he comes out on top. I mean, planning is his forte. When he doesn't have a plan, he kind of suffers for it. Also, the MC is fairly single-minded in his pursuit of the goal of getting back the other player and winning enough dough to help poor Aunt May for operations since Spidey can't do it. I mean, I'm sorry. His mother needs help. Like I said, this is one of those tropes, like Spider-Man, it used to, always say to me when I was a kid, Peter Parker had to go out and catch a photograph so he could get enough money to help poor sick Aunt May get her medication or have an operation. She had a brain tumor one week, and the next week she had lumbago. And it's sort of the same thing here. He's got a sick mother at home, and how many times have you seen this where the mother is sick and dying, and she needs help, and the only way to get it is to succeed in the game? I mean, I've seen that probably 5 times I can think of. Either way, the one thing that worked best for me was the love interest that was not much of a love interest. And by that, I mean the love interest is older. She lives by herself. She lives in her own home. He's only 16. And both of them are just more or less conjoined in their hatred of the other gamer, the douchebag. And their lust for revenge against him. They wanted to pose him as the top player. They want him to not win the money, so on and so forth. And that's where they unify at. So while there is, maybe a spark here or there, and I can't even say they even play that card, but you can feel them becoming closer as the book moves on. It's not a love interest, and it's just the way it should be because she's too old for it. The narration by Sims, I have to say, is really excellent. He does an incredible job, and I enjoyed every single second of his work. He absolutely keeps things interesting and on track. Even the real-world scenes, which I really could have done without, flow due to how well he handles things. And I could hear the MC's desperation and panic in a lot of the scenes coming through him. The bad stuff is just what I said. Nothing new here. It's just a retread of most lit series you're going to have read. And to me, this has a very, very strong Awaken Online feel to it, in that the bad guy is someone that the MC knows, and they have a grand battle to see who wins, and the bad guy is a dick. And the MC even kind of takes on the role of being the bad guy in the game, playing cultists who are factionally similar to the WoW's Horde division, for the Horde, for the Alliance. This is kind of a Horde thing, and the only difference is he's the first guy to take on the role of the Horde. So, the MC is likable, he has some cool powers, he favors tactics over just straight up fighting. Wait, that's still Awaken. Yeah. Anyway, I couldn't help but shake the feeling I read this before. Like I said, it just comes up. This has been there many times. I've seen this, whether it's the tropes or it's the storyline, but it really, really works as it stands. It is a really good story. It's not an amazing story. You didn't walk away going, doggone, that Damien guy was really awesome and amazing and just knocked my socks off, because I've seen a lot of the same things before. But it was a pretty good read. My final score is 7.8 stars. It's a good book, well-paced, has actual likable characters, but feels like a retread of familiar stories. So, next up is Party Hard, Pixel Dust, Book 1, by David Petrie. Or if you're a fan of the Dick Van Dyke Show, David Petrie, as Alan Brady would often refer to him. Narrated by, Luke Daniels? With a book length of 15 hours and 15 minutes, get out of town.
Max damage 24, shoved with one hand at a scale fang as it pinned him to the ground. The beast's jaw scraped against the underside of the pistol he gripped in his other hand. He would have shot the thing, but the angle was off, leaving the muzzle of the gun sticking out the side of the creature's mouth like a cigar. Oh well, at least it wasn't biting him. There had been a second scale fang, but he'd pushed that jerk off the ledge. Granted, he'd also dropped his other gun in the process. Now it was laying on the ground, just out of reach. He shoved again at the beast above him, its over-muscled neck holding steady as it pushed back in an attempt to eat his face. A droplet of drool fell from its tongue. It would have landed in his mouth if Max's scarf hadn't slipped up over his chin a moment before. He blew a puff of air at the fabric with a frustrated grunt to clear it away from his face. Then another drop of drool fell. Blah! Right in my mouth!
Party Hard pretty much lives up to its name. It's about a party, of 6 individuals and their quest to stop the evil machinations of a dark programmer who invented the tech that is used in the game they're playing and trying to save. And it's a pretty cool idea how they do this. We also get some pretty sweet new style of classes with cool names like a Venom. You can be a Venom, or not so exciting names like a Shield. Like, you can be my Shield, which is like a tank. But anyway, you get the idea. On the other hand, I can also see how changing up names, for classes could ultimately be a little confusing. Now, the party consists of mostly humans, a human-animal mix, and a fairy. So, one of the characters also has gender swapped, which leads to some funny moments. The good thing about the book is the character interactions, the plain old-fashioned actions, such as some sweet battle scenes, and the easy friendship and camaraderie of the team itself. Now, I don't know if you've ever gamed with other people, but groups aren't always as cohesive and friendly as this. Not that there isn't tension, but most of the groups I've ever been in, they're pickup groups. I never really have had a steady gaming group. My wife has. When she played WoW, she had the same group of people. Me, it was like kind of LFG, not guild, but group. And I'd get into play, and we would end up bickering and fighting, and probably somebody would Leroy Jenkins their way into trouble. I don't know who that would have been. And then they would ninja loot as we were, waiting for it to figure out who got what. So I'm not really comfortable saying that other books don't do the same thing as Party Hard, but it's an easy and comfortable feel, and it doesn't seem forced or shoehorned in any way as the party works together. But I just know that, reality doesn't always meet fantasy, and here the fantasy is that these are pretty cool people working together. Now, the concept of the game itself is kind of cool. You play while you sleep. You sleep. So for all you adults out there who are looking for an excuse to nap, this is the perfect game for you. I almost kind of wish it was real, because I never get enough sleep. And if I could say, hey, honey, I'm going to go play a game for a little while, but catch a sweet nap in between, yeah, I'd be playing this game all the time. I would be rocking it. I'd be like level 100 in about 2 hours, because, yeah. And given that I don't really have any fun type of dreams, it'd be perfect for me. So, like I say, it's a good game for me. But I think teenage boys, they have different types of dreams, and so they would probably skip this game in droves. So I don't know, if you're looking for the older market, you would probably have this sealed up real quick. But the younger market, not so much. I mean, unless you and I can't even say that, because I was going to say, unless you put Pam Anderson in there. But most of the kids today, my son's age, wouldn't even know who Pam Anderson is, which is scary, because I grew up and I knew who Marilyn Monroe was, and Jane Mansfield, and you name them, I could tell you who the sweet babes were from each era. And now, not so much. Which is kind of sad, because I think my generation, the people we had growing up, like Pam Anderson and Jenny McCarthy, we kind of got screwed, because they kind of skanked out at, on certain things. Like, just honestly, Monroe had class, and Pam Anderson had with Tommy Lee Jones, porno video. I mean, bleh, so I think we kind of got the raw end of things, but I digress. The only real downside to the book is it has something of a slow start. Now, I very firmly believe in getting into the action within about 3,000 words or less in a book. More importantly, the ideal thing would be to start in the game and then flashback to how it all got started. That I just really have this thing about getting into the game, getting it going, and get it happening. This is LitRPG. This is not Lord of the Rings, where I need to have the hobbits, out smoking some herb and having some cake and party for their second breakfast and so on and so forth, to kind of set a mood. The mood is as I'm getting into a game, and that's what I like. So the faster I'm into that world, the better you are. And that's why I think I prefer most times second books in a series, because they're already in the game and it's already established and it's a well-built world. This is where the books should shine, is books 2. Book 2 should be 10 times better than book 1 ever thought about being in every single case, because you've got set up, all the other stuff is out of the way, and you're good to go. So, like I say, for me, the slow start, it's not a game changer. I'm used to it, but I really just want to get into the mix as soon as I possibly can. Otherwise, I think it wraps up neatly and tells a good tale. Daniels, what I say, he does his standard amazing job, and I find it hilarious how easy it is to say that such a high quality narrator does incredible work as a standard, everyday kind of thing. Hey, I'm, really amazing. It's like Superman, every single day, stopping those bullets with his finger, ping, 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 and nobody blinking anymore because they've seen it 10 billion times. But if you really think about it, even if it's the 10 billionth time he's stopping a bullet with his finger or his eye or a nose hair, it's amazing. It's cool. And we kind of get, desensitized to the awesomeness. And I think I do that a lot with other narrators too, like Hayes and Parsnow, Rennie, Podell, Adams, Taylor, etc. They all pump in more acting with their voice than just about most people that play on TV. And all I can say is that Daniel does not disappoint, and he carries the story. So I hope you get the idea. Daniels is a good, great, fantastic, amazing narrator, and he really does well with the story. He helps make the story go along, and of course, the story itself is very solid. It's well set. Just a hint of a slow start. So final score, 8.2 stars. I had a lot of fun and enjoyed the party characters. I would like to see more and can't wait for the next book. So here's a late addition to this week's podcast. I did have this done, and I just figured I could get this in under the wire here. So, the next book I'm doing is Varnoth, a LitRPG story, The Black Blade, Book 1, by Lavelle Jackson, narrated by Jack Veraces, with a book length of 8 hours and 9 minutes.
Come out! Varnoth yelled and begged with all the energy he could muster. I need your help! The tiny attempt at communication with the unseen creature exhausted him. Then, a head popped out from behind an oak tree. The head of the beast appeared to be green, but he couldn't be sure. I see you. Please, come out. As you can see, I cannot harm you. I'm bound to this wretched cross, Varnoth pleaded. The hesitant creature stepped out from behind the tree and walked to the edge of the road. The beast was green, and very small. He could not have been more than 3 feet tall. After Varnoth got a good look at the green humanoid, more text appeared. Goblin Scout, Level 1. After much hesitation, the goblin crossed the dusty road and stood at the base of the cross, looking up at the Catman.
So I want to start off by saying, this is the kind of story I like to see. It's a story about a man who picks up a LitRPG novel and loves it. Then he gets into more LitRPG novels, going from one to another, eating them up quickly. Then he gets to reviewing them. It's beginning to sound very familiar. Until he actually becomes a writer of the genre. He actually decides to put pen to paper and write a story of LitRPG. And it simply amazes me how many fans, just honestly, fans of this literature end up writing stories about it in some capacity. Truly, if you go to the Facebook pages, I think 90% of the people there was somebody that like probably read like Scotty Fletch, or however you pronounce his name. I'm sorry, or somebody else in the genre, and they said, that blew my mind. Fletch is amazing, and this was a great concept. Or they maybe read a story years back, like the Guardians of the Flame series by Joel Rosenberg, or maybe they were just fans of Dungeons and Dragons and they like the concept, or they've seen Ready Player One. They take those amazing ideas that they've seen and decide to create a story that melds into things they liked and discarded the things they don't, and they just became members of the genre rapidly. Like I say, if you go through the majority of people that are on any given Facebook page about LitRPG, they're either fans that will become writers, fans that are writers, or fans that wish they could write and they just don't have the time or the ability to get it done in any short span of time. So I really respect it, and I'm really happy to see when something like this happens. So, Lavelle, I'm giving you props here, and I'm sure that this goes out for everybody, but because you're a reviewer too, I know the difficulty of doing reviews and getting stuff written. So I give you props to that. Just like Ramon. Ramon is a writer. He is a reviewer. He does other shows. He puts this podcast together. I mean, Ramon really goes out of his way to make this community amazing. And anybody who can join in on that, I appreciate it. So the story of Varnoth the Black Blade is pretty simple, and it's pretty simplistic. It's one of the stories that I absolutely love to hate. It's the infamous, what is it called? Slice of Life. Yes. It is named after Dexter Morgan's boat, the Slice of Life stories. And that's how I feel about them most of the time. I am really, really trying hard to push past my biases on the Slice of Life stories and just accept them for what they are and enjoy the stories little by little. It's beginning to work. So, where I might have been just before really ready to offhandedly say the story goes nowhere. It has no real point to it. It just wanders and meanders around. And I was probably really hard on Daniel Shinofin way back when with his Apocalypse Gates book 1, because I know that was like one of my biggest issues, was how the book just kind of didn't really have a point. It just kind of said, here's what's happening, here's the character, and here's what happens. And it didn't have like, we have to get to Mordor, or we have to, stop the machines from, destroying, humanity. It didn't have any of that. It was kind of like, you're stuck here, wander around and do what you got to do. And those kind of stories really irk me, because I'm one of these guys that I really feel like I need a complete story told within a rapid amount of time. 1, 2, 3 trilogies are great. And again, I go back to Jim Butcher. Jim Butcher is, if you don't know Jim Butcher, he's famous for almost reinventing the urban fantasy genre, or reinvigorating it, or creating it, depending on how you look at it. And he has, 17 books under his belt for the Dresden Files. So, 17 books is nothing to sneer at. But it's building to a greater overarching tale, something that is coming into play here really soon. And, he has the last bit set up as a trilogy, which is bizarre. Why make it a trilogy when you've got 17 books and you're wanting to make 21 or 22 books in a series? I don't know. But anyway, that's my issue with Slice of Life. I think that, you can have a great, big, long, overarching story. With Butcher, each book has a very distinctive, here's where it starts, here's where it ends, but it's overall connected. And those are the kind of slice of life stories I like, because I don't feel like it's a slice of life. It's a self-contained story that has an overarching, broader goal to connect to other parts of the stories from the beginning all the way to the end where you're at that point in time. And so, like I say, I struggle with the slice of life books that just kind of go all over the place. And that is one of the things I'm really struggling to get across. And so, like I say, for me, Varnoth is a slice of life book. He really doesn't have any goals. Everything is kind of thrown at him. So I really have to, I'm overlooking certain things, and I will do that for everybody. So, if I say something and I'm like, I still don't really love slice of life books. Some I have, and most I don't. Like, for example, I'll be doing a Wandering Inn special really soon, and I really liked the book, but it actually had, in the 40 hours it took, it had a beginning, a middle, and then an end point that kind of completes everything for that book. So it might have been slice of life in most people's eyes. In my eyes, it built up to a crescendo at the end that had a lot of impact, a lot of points, and stuff like that. So I'll talk about that later on in the next episode, because I am doing, it'll either be a standalone for the week, or it'll be in addition to. But anyway, the book is about, let's get back to Varnoth, okay? Sorry, everybody. I tend to ramble. I digress very often. The book is about a shadow panther that wakes up tied to a cross. Okay, he's crucified. He has no memory of who he is or how he got there. And he gets cut down by some Gandalf type, more like Fizban, if you know Fizban. If you don't, go look him up. You have to find out who Fizban is. As I call him, Fizban. But Fizban is amazing. He's probably the greatest wizard, non-wizard of all time, because he's a wizard, but he's not a wizard. But anyway, the Gandalf guy kind of sends him on his way. He sets him up, teaches him a little bit about the world. And then the story wanders as Varnoth strives to just basically level up and learn a bit himself. He meets several companions along the way as he forges his path to power. Some of the companions come and go, some stay, it's kind of hard to define everything. But it does just kind of wander from point A to point B, because I'm assuming this is just book one of a trilogy. So you've got a few books that you got to get through here before you get to the end. One thing I will say that I appreciated the most about the story was nobody's safe. And I mean nobody. Well, I mean, except for Varnoth. He's the lead character. But Varnoth kills characters, or I should say Jackson, because Varnoth does kill a lot of characters. But anyway, Jackson kills characters without hesitation or mercy. And he doesn't even ease you into it with the knowledge that the death was swift or painless or merciful. I mean, it's just like, how you don't know what's happening until it happens, which I like that a lot. And secondly, he does not skimp on the gore. He does not flinch or skimp at all. He is eager to show you exactly how bloody and gruesome each death that he has his panther cause can be. Now, I know some people see, and here's the thing. Way back when I was reading like Life Reset by Sherman Kuznets, they were talking like months later. They were talking about this gruesome torture scene, and I had listened to that book. And I was like, I don't remember there being anything really gruesome in it. And all this, people are like, oh my God, there was like this eye-popping scene where he's being tortured. I'm like, that was bothersome. And I had to remember, what I have seen in my life and had done in my life, and things like that don't even like register like on a 1 of a Richter scale for me. Like, if you're watching Goodfellas and they're squeezing the guy's head and his eye pops, it was barely a note for me, I mean, honestly, or was that Vegas? I think it was Vegas. Yeah. Either way, you get what I'm talking about. Joe Pesci squeezing some guy's head in the vice. Or in The Fly Part 2, where they crush a guy's head with an elevator. I was in the theater. I'm like, yeah, okay. And everybody else was kind of like, what? So gore. And I grew up on, Splatterfest, Fangoria, Monsters of Filmland. I've been watching horror movies since I was 2. And the scarier, the better. They've never bothered me. I sleep like a baby at night when I sleep. If I close my eyes, I don't ever have bad dreams. So it never bothers me. And so some people might say that his books are overly gory. I don't. I think there's a lot of blood and body parts and things like that. But to me, it didn't really affect me that way. But most people will say, oh, there was a lot of this and that disembowelment, and eye popping, and there was beheadings and braids, and that's fine. But I'm just letting you know, I'm giving you warnings. Eyeballs do fly, intestines do fall, and the depictions are pretty graphic, but that makes it more realistic. I mean, if you're talking about like for example, if you watch Braveheart, in Braveheart, they're lopping off limbs on battlefields. They're not just, oh, clink, 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 stab, I fell over dead. It's a full-on, here goes a leg, here goes an arm, here goes whatever. They don't hold back because that's what really happens. And so I really appreciate that. Now, the only issues that I really have that came with the fights was it never really seemed like Varnoth struggled too much. I mean, Varnoth he's too hardcore too quickly in some aspects. I think that for a newbie, he just kind of rolls into the battle, and for being a rogue, which is kind of what he plays up until the point he becomes a rogue, he's pretty good at just straight up hand-to-hand fighting. And the one thing that really shocked me is I wanted to see more of the cat aspect of things. I wanted to see, I'm sorry, I'm getting texted all over the place today, more of like the cat scratch or the fangs ripping out throats, that sort of thing, like using his back legs to, scrape out somebody's stomach, that sort of stuff. That would have been really great, but you don't get that. But there is a lot of throat slitting, beheading, backstabbing going on. So he's kind of like a meld of the Terminator and Leon from The Professional. He's stone cold, highly skilled, he's unstoppable and relentless. And also, I nearly let my kids listen to the book until some of the swearing happened, and I'll be frank with you. The swearing in the book, the level of swearing is pretty minimalistic. It's just a few meager swear words, like the lower end scale of how bad they can be. Like no F-bombs or anything like that. But I'm pretty cool with like swearing, and I'm actually really good with the disemboweling and stuff like that. I mean, my kids come home and they'll see dead bodies in the house and they're like, yeah, okay. So I know that doesn't bother them. I'm just, for those who are listening now and they don't know, I'm a funeral director and we live at the funeral home. So when they come into the house and they come through the chapel, they'll see people. So don't get the wrong impression, folks. I'm not a mass murderer. Not mass by any means, anyway. But anyway, even that doesn't bother me so much. But there were a few things, like there was one guy that was kind of performing a sort of a sex act that I don't want to get into. And there was a lot of mention of hooas. Now, if you're from, that area, Jersey and stuff like that, you know what a hua is. They're whores. There's a lot of talk about whores and whoring and being whores and what whores do. And it's funny because I know Jackson, he is a huge fan of harem. And, he's always saying, oh, they wimp out on the sex. And I was thinking, as I was reading this, when's he going to get to the sex part? He's got to have this. And he didn't. He almost kind of wimps out on it because he's wanting to make his first book, a good pure LitRPG book. And I understand that because I wouldn't put sex in my book unless I specifically said this is going to be a naughty kind of harem-y book or something like that. And the funny thing is like Varnoth literally has no love interest in the book, which is great because I'm not a big fan of love interest to start with unless there's a really good reason for it. So that's just the way it is. But because of the horror talk, and all the whoas and the sexy stuff, I couldn't let my kids listen to it. And I think if maybe some of that would have been pulled back, this would have been great. And I don't want to call it a young adult book because it's not, because it's bloody and gory. But I would have let my younger kids listen to it as long as they're in bed. Because even the swearing, like I said, I could care less. But my wife gets really delicate on the sex stuff. But if I'm like watching a show and she walks into the room, the first thing the person on the screen is going to say is the F-bomb. They're going to be like, for sure. As soon as it happens. And then she's like, why are the kids watching this? And I'm like, it's a PG-13 movie. They're allowed one F-bomb somewhere in the film, and you just walked in on the one time. They're going to, So I get chewed out over that anyway. I'm willing to take a chewing on that, but not on them talking about some guys spanking monkeys or, the act of taking money for sex. That kind of gets me in trouble. So I stay away from that. Now, you want to know the truth of the matter? Here is my biggest issue of the whole book. Like I say, it's slice of life and, it has certain things. The biggest issue I had with the story, simplistic as it is, it gets you from where it needs to be. There's not a lot of hidden depth or shading to it. It's like he does this, and this, and he levels up. Perfectly okay in LitRPG. It's the narration. I am not a huge fan fan of Jack Veraces. I'm just huge. I'm not a fan though. I'm just huge. Wait, okay. So let me kind of explain. I first heard Jack Veraces in Dean Hennigar's Limitless Land, and I really liked Limitless Land a lot. But Veraces kind of dropped the ball even there, because if I can remember right, and forgive me, Dean, if you're listening and I get this wrong, the lead character in Limitless Land is like a Southerner guy, and Veraces makes like literally no attempt to even portray him as being from the South. He just kind of does like, oh, I'm Jack Veraces and I'm going to talk like this through the entire book. And that's okay if the book is just like a fantasy setting, but when you're talking about a real world guy and he has a certain kind of accent, at least freaking try. That's all I say. Just try. Give it a shot. That's where I say. And it's the same thing here. When you have a lead character, an MC, who is inhuman, give that inhuman a voice that will match it. You've got a Shadow Panther, so instead of maybe Varnoth talking like, oh, I went down to get some tea the other day, and I picked some flowers along the way because I found some very nice angel plums, and they were healing me all over the place. No. That's not how you do it. You're like, Varnoth, I'm going to stab you in the eye and then gut you. And Varnoth replies, no, you will not do anything to me because I will bite your face off. That is an animalistic, inhuman MC's voice. Okay? Or even if he's upset and he's in a fight, and before Varnoth says anything, they're like, okay, and they're coming at Varnoth, and you go, I will kill you. If you're not going to give it that growly voice, at least he's a cat. Give him a hiss. Make him chuff. Chuff. Anything to show me that the MC is anything but a human being. And again, if I wasn't told every couple chapters or pages or whatever you want to, that he's a Shadow Panther, I would never have known. Never have known. Now, it's not a huge deal. It's not that big a deal, but in my eyes, it is in a lot of ways. But there's also other stuff. Like, he's completely inconsistent with the way he pronounces stuff. In the beginning of the book, Varnoth learns herbalism. That's a hard H. He gathers herbs. He goes out in the woods. He's a herbalist, and that's how Veraces reads the lines. He's a herbalist, and he went and got herbs, and blah, 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 blah. Okay? Then there's a joke midway through the book about an herbalist shop. And, this is just Lavelle making little funnies at things. And it's great. I get it. He has a guy named Herb, and he sells herbs. But I say herbs. You would say herbs. And according to Veraces, it should have been herbs. That would have been funny too. Because then Varnoth would have said, herbs, what's the heck? But he doesn't. He goes, herbs. Oh, I get it. And then later on, the herbalist becomes an herbalist, and the herbs become herbs. And I'm just like, can you please just be consistent? That's all I want, is just some consistency. And like, honestly, there are other things that bother me, and these are things I can let go because it's accent. If there's a narrator, and he's clearly, like if he was French, and he spoke with a French accent, and he says stuff like this, I would not fault him for talking, with this kind of a voice, because he is a Frenchman. And that is the story he is telling. He's telling it like a Frenchman. Or a Cajun. I don't know if I can get those two things close enough. But anyway, like, inventory becomes inventory. He reached into his inventory. And I'm like, his inventory? Like, is that a place or he goes to invent things? I don't know what he's talking about. Or a composite bow becomes a composite. He grabbed his composite bow. And I'm thinking, there are times in the world where you just have to say, how do they say this in the country I'm going to be reading this for? Even though people in England can read this or listen to it, It's mostly for an American audience, and I hate to even say that. It's mostly for an audience of citizens of the United States, because we're all, if you live in North or South America, American citizens, okay? So I'll redo that. It's made for people who live in the United States for 90% of it, okay? Yes, there's going to be other parts of the world, but even then, they're going to expect the U.S. style wording. It'd be like me writing, the word gray in a book with an EY rather than AY, because I like the English version better. It's confusing. Or color with OUR at the end instead of just OR. I have to make concessions for what I'm doing if I write something or when I speak, and he doesn't. He's just like, well, I'm going to go off. And a lot of times his vocal acting, he just kind of makes it where he's, okay, if I make this really energetic here, it's going to be great. And if I keep it down low here, it's okay. That's his acting. It's either really high and fast or it's really, that kind of thing. Like I said, I don't know how to say this any nicer. Veraces does not do for me what he does for most people, because I know there's a lot of people that like Veraces. And there are probably books that he is better suited for, where having an English accent, like Sufficiently Advanced Magic, great. Let him narrate that. That would be ideal for him, because it's got that kind of, it could be that upper crusty kind of stuff and talk in that capacity. But here, this is a very down and dirty kind of book. And it does not match me. Now, you're going to say, oh my God, you just spent probably 10 minutes ranting on Veraces. And yeah, I'm going to just say he's not my favorite part of the book. I mean, honestly, if I could have taken anybody else, I would have taken J.J. Janess over this, because at least J.J. Janess, as much as I didn't like anything he's ever done, would have done this properly in some capacity. Okay. And again, that's no disrespect to J.J. Janess. I'm sure he's a great narrator. He's not my kind of narrator, but Veraces is even past that for me. Just because I just don't think he tries. I just think there's, he tries to show love for the story, but that's it. He just kind of puts in that much and not over the top. Like, if I compared him with, like, Jeff Hayes or Andrea Parsnow or Annalise Rennie or Luke Daniels or, Nick Padell, if I compare him, you're going to see, like, here's where the cream is and here's where, the cream rises and the other stuff just kind of sinks a little bit. He just doesn't stand up, in my opinion, to their work, because I don't know. The first thing I thought when I read that he was going to have a Panther man as a main character was, I can't wait to hear what he sounds like, because I'm an audio guy, right? I really want an audio thing. And if you think about it, Panthers, they have this kind of cleffy kind of mouth, and they have these really sharp teeth. So when he talked just like a regular person, or when he have some sort of other way of speaking, like, I would kill that man if I were not so, whatever. Like I said, I've shown you how I would do it. I would have growled, I will destroy you, as he's fighting the bad bandit, the highwayman, okay? Those are the things that he needed to do. If he's happy, he purrs. None of that. None. And it may not be even in the book, but God, I would have put it in there just because I would have said, character-wise, he's happy. I'd have been like, you girls have been the best thing that have happened to me on my journey so far. I really appreciate you being companions and helping me through this process. Just do that, and it would have been great. So, yeah, okay, so I've ranted a lot about poor Jack, and I don't want to browbeat the man. Like I say, he fits in a lot of spaces that I would never go to. I'm not even going to go there, and don't anybody say anything in the comments section about it. Anyway, he's not awful. I just took exception to several issues that I had. And again, like I say, I nitpick things sometimes. I really do. But I require consistency. I really do. So when you say herbalist, herbs, and then you go herbalist, I just go nuts. I just really do. It's just like in the one book I love to pick on, the ensigns, the character kept saying, ensigns, go do this. And everybody would say, ensign this and ensign that. And it was ensigns, like, Ensign Wesley Crusher. And that's just like, if you're not familiar with the word, look it up. Ensign, if you, like, I know there's no way you read that word, you said, ensign so-and-so, and you're like, man, that's weird. He must have made up a rank. I've never heard of an ensign. Maybe you go back and you look up the friggin' word and you see what it means and how to pronounce the darn thing. And it's the same thing with herbs. In the U.S., we have herbs. And some people do now start to do that probably in the last 10 or 15 years, the herbs. And it drives me crazy because I grew up, I'm a child of the 60s, really the 70s, but I was born in the 60s. And it was never, hey man, you want some herb? Man, you want some herb, and I would say, no, I just would like to drop acid and we'll move on from there. But anyway, it's been like that my whole life, and seeing it transform is fine if everybody does it, but it's not. It's a select few. So again, I'm browbeating. My final score for the book is going to be a 7.7 because of some wonky parts, but the gore, fighting, and Varnoth's dedication to doing what's right overcomes a lot of the issues I have, especially since most of my issues come from, nitpicky stuff with the narration, because the narration is not bad. Overall, I think Varese does a decent job. It's just not an amazing job. He didn't blow me out of the water. Like I said, I know for a fact, because after I wrote this and got everything ready to go and started getting myself revved up for this, I've seen more people talk about how good Varese's narration was, especially in Limitless Land. And I liked Limitless Land's story, just couldn't take the narration. And I was really kind of iffy about even doing this book with Varese's, just because, I'm not a big fan of his. And I've learned that I'm better off just staying away from certain people's writing or certain people's narration, because I'm just going to browbeat a dead horse. I'm just going to just pick on him for no reason. Well, no, there's reasons, but I'm just going to just pound this stuff into the earth until they're 6 feet down. And I don't want to do that to anybody. So I do step back and stay away many times, in comparison to when I should be reviewing certain things. But I don't want to, just give bad reviews because it's not my style. If I don't like Slice of Life, and I just said, well, it's Slice of Life, it sucks, that's not really fair. So I try very hard to read Slice of Life. So my final score is 7.7. I think that there should be some work done character-wise, and maybe tool up a little bit more, give him some purpose, and make him not quite so tough. But I think it's got a good potential. So 7.7 stars. All right, so the next book is Mayor of Noobtown by Ryan Rimmel, narrated by Jonathan McLean. It has a book length of 9 hours and 3 minutes.
Revealed that I wasn't wearing any AR devices, or my glasses. Glancing around the room, I realized that I could see everything perfectly, which was generally not the case. In my youth, they had been abnormally large Coke bottle lenses. With modern technology, they had become more manageable, but still absolutely required if I wanted to see anything. Until now, that is. "Hello?" I called out, suddenly recognizing that I could call out. "I've never heard one talk before," came the rumbling response. "Ignore it! I'm going to find out what unbound means," came the other voice again. "It might be able to tell us what it means from its character sheet," replied the first, his voice becoming quieter as it trailed off.
So, this is a rare gem. It's one of those books that is funny from start to finish, is serious, and tells a complete story while managing to leave the door open for more later. Technically, the book could have ended right where it does, and I would have said, great book, wish there was more, but cool. And that's not true. I would have written Rimmel and begged for more. And to say written Rimmel and not stumble over it, I'm so proud of myself right now because I couldn't say DeGuayo earlier. See, DeGuayo, duh. Anyway, in truth, I originally thought this was a harem book called Mayor of Noobtown. but was sadly disappointed that I was wrong. I thought it was part of the classic Boobtown series. Okay, bad joke. It's not got anything to do with Boobtown. It's not a harem. But I have to say I love the concept of Noobtown from start to finish. It begins with a man getting run over by a truck and waking up somewhere else. I think I've heard this before. And again, this is one of those things where I'm going to cite, there's a lot of times you're going to get tropes that come up and you're going to say, I've heard it before, I've heard it before, I've heard it before. But it's okay if it's done in a neat way or it's a fun way or something else. Like The Occultist, it was full of the stuff I've seen 100 times, but it still worked out at the end and I enjoyed it. And it's the same thing here. I've seen the guy get run over by a truck at least 3 or 4 times, and there's other ways to get them into these worlds, but it worked and it was fun and it was a fresh take. As soon as he was dead, it was all new. So I'm not spoiling anything here. So he gets run over by this truck, he wakes up somewhere else, and he finds he's being character built by some mysterious voices. And while their attention is turned, he begins to explore the character center, the character place, looking for class options and so on and so forth. He soon discovers that the voices are demons who want to erase his memories and send him off to fight some evil, unknown, powerful Dark Lord. From there, havoc ensues, and the MC and one of the demons become bound together, forming the beginning of a really horrible friendship. As I said, the book is filled with funny business, humor, stuff you don't see every day. It's got some good banter. It's got some good situational comedy. It really plays a lot of strengths. So like I say, both situational and banter. And 90% of the jokes land and they stick really hard. So it's a pretty good setup. Probably the best and longest gag is that of the MC's name, Jim. And it kind of harkens back to, in several ways, the old Monty Python joke where, the great wizard's up there casting fireball and all this, and he goes, "Who are you, great wizard?" He goes, "There be those who call me Tim." And sorry if I spoiled that part for you if you've never seen Monty Python and the Holy Grail, but if not, what the hell are you doing here? You should have seen that years ago. Classic film. Anyway, it does do that, but it also adds to the silly name bit in a fantasy world, like, Throgmar or whatever was supposed to be who he was, or Grabthar the Barbarian. He was supposed to be Grabthar. His abilities, let me just back up a little bit. Jim comes off as overpowered, okay? But this isn't like a video game MMORPG, even if the world he's in has those elements. Now, his strengths and powers and so forth all kind of come forth from his time that is spent in the Character Creation Center and are pretty cool. He did something there, and I don't know if I should say it or not, so I'm not going to. But it ends up so Jim can have any, and this is just going to be something you find early on, he can have any class that the game provides, be it from thief to swordsman or mage to sage. It doesn't matter. All he has to do is acquire the class via the normal means, and he just can't announce, "I'm going to be a wizard," and suddenly he can cast spells. He has to actually go and do studying and become a wizard, or he would have to go to a holy place and learn to become a cleric. But he has all of those options open to him at every given moment. So he learns different classes like woodsman, thief, fighter, so on and so forth, as he plays, because these are things he does. Like, he tries to sneak and pick a lock. Pow! You're learning to be a thief. So he gets these really cool extras, and he can level them up separately. So he might look like he's a first level, say, woodsman, but he's really a 4th level fighter, and he's a 3rd level thief, and he's also, he's stronger than he appears most times, and people can only see the sheet when they look at him and scan him, the sheet that he's currently using. So, really, if he was smart, he could put up a 1st level character that, he hasn't ever leveled up and make people think he's this really weak guy, but he's really not. And that's kind of what he does sometimes. He has some awesome abilities. The downside is, like I said, he actually has to acquire those via certain things. This allows him to do the impossible. So again, what would seem overpowered to most people, I don't see it that way. Just because he's able to do things in the game or the world that other players can't, he didn't cheat, he didn't do anything, he earned his capability by wits or by hook or by crook. I won't say how. But the only time that I thought Rimmel really stretched probability was when Jim was setting up traps for a rescue. He set a ton of traps in a very small window of opportunity. Like tons of traps that were not, well, I just won't say, but either way, the traps were set and there was no way he could have done all those traps in the amount of time he had. John McClane narrates. See that? John McClane reading a book on fatherhood, and he's about to narrate that book. So I'm glad to see how he stopped doing film franchises, especially that last one that, Die Even Harder or Die Again Harder or something. I don't know. What? Oh, they're telling me it's the wrong McClane. It's not even spelled the same. Sorry. So actually, while the new guy is new to my ears, he's narrated about 100 books, just under there, probably about 75, 77 books in that area, and it really shows. He has incredible comedic timing, which is a bonus, especially for a book like this, and he also gets the way to tell a joke that you don't normally see narrators do. Most times they don't know how to tell a joke, and they fail epically when attempting to do so. So I give him a lot of credit. This works out really well. He really carries this book. The book is a lot of fun. It has a great story. Like I say, it's very cohesive, and it is very easily finished where it's at, but it's not. It's going to continue on very clearly. But it's left open, but you could see how I could say this is a standalone book if I wanted to. And I like that a lot. And this is just, me saying McClane does an amazing job. He carries the story. And this is another guy I'm going to be telling you to look out for. Because if he gets into this business of LitRPG stuff too, there's going to be some really, really great competition going on, which is a good thing, because not that we don't have the same people narrating all the time, but Rimmel, he's one of these people that could get here and he would have more jobs, and he deserves it. So anyway, it's great. Final score is 8.6 stars. I had a ton of fun with this. Was sad it ended so quickly, but I can't wait for the next book. I don't think you will be disappointed in any way, shape, or form. It's funny, and it works quite well. Well, thank you oh so much for watching, everyone. I do appreciate you taking the time to listen to the show or watch the show on YouTube. As always, if you want to support us, you can like the LitRPG Audiobook Podcast Facebook page, the LitRPG Podcast Facebook page, or the YouTube page, or just share and like the video. For Pete's sake, share it, like it. No, I'm not going to beg. I don't do that. I really do hope that you've enjoyed the show, though. I always ask you, please leave comments or suggestions in the comment sections below. Tell me what you think. I like to hear your thoughts. I like to see what you've considered, important, what didn't work. And remember, you can always follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. So that's it for the show this week. I have a really special, I'm hoping, one-shot edition coming out between now and the next program. I'll have a regular show next week too, but I also want to get one more special in as we go. But it's just about one book. Anyway, I'll see what I can do with that. But in the meantime, I'm Ray. Keep listening.